Sometimes, life has a quiet way of reminding us where we came from. A normal Monday morning in Tokyo. Due to company restructuring, Billy will be transferred to the suburban branch. At first, he thought it was a mistake. But as the global economy slowed and his company tightened its belt, Billy didn't have much choice. He had to accept the transfer. It had been years since he last returned home. His parents passed away when he was still young, and from then on, life became a series of quiet battles, studying, working, surviving. Tokyo gave him opportunities, but it also took a piece of his peace. Days blurred together. He was always running, yet he couldn't quite say where to. By the time Billy arrived, the air smelled of wet soil and summer rain, something he hadn't felt in years. His childhood friend, Kenji, was already waiting for him at the home. Kenji's family had offered to let Billy stay with them until he could find a place of his own. They greeted him with smiles that felt both familiar and strange, the kind that reminded you of things you didn't realize you'd missed. That day, house filled with laughter. They played Go Together and stories of simple days. Billy sat quietly at first, unsure how to join in. The rhythm of small-town life was so different from the world he just left behind. But as he listened to Kenji's talk, he felt something gentle return, a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in a long time. Still, beneath the warmth, a part of Billy felt restless. The countryside was too slow, too quiet. The night stretched endlessly, broken only by the soft chirping of crickets outside his window. He missed the glow of the city lights, the rush of deadlines, even the crowded trains.
ただいまー。北山くん、もう来てたの？
ああ、ついさっきね。
ごめんね、今からお昼ご飯作るから食べるでしょ？
あ、うん。
それにしても久しぶりだね。ずいぶん垢抜けたんじゃない？パッと見誰かわかんなかったよ。
あ、いや、宮崎さんも綺麗になって。あ、今白石さんか。
やだ、綺麗だなんて褒めるのも上手になったね。
いや、もうさ、いいから早く飯作ってよ。腹減ってんだけど。
何よ、久しぶりなんだからいいじゃんね。
Deep down, he also knew he needed this. He needed time to breathe, to reset, to understand what he truly wanted. Maybe this move wasn't a punishment after all. Maybe it was an invitation, a chance to rebuild, to rediscover what truly mattered beyond career titles and city lights. He didn't know it yet, but this summer in the countryside would change the way he saw life forever. It would teach him that success isn't always about running faster. Sometimes it's about learning when to slow down. And in that stillness, he would find something he had long forgotten, the quiet beauty of connection, kindness, and gratitude. The first few days passed slowly. Billy followed the same routine each morning. Wake up early, walk to the small branch office, complete his reports, and return to Kenji's home before sunset. It wasn't a demanding job, but everything felt unfamiliar. The office was quiet, the projects smaller, and the pace much gentler than the city's unending rush. At first, Billy struggled with that calmness. But something curious began to happen. The silence started to feel less like emptiness and more like space. Space to think. Space to notice. One morning, Kenji invited him to help with the community's summer festival. At first, Billy hesitated. In Tokyo, weekends were for catching up on work, not for festivals or lanterns. But he agreed, unsure of what to expect. For the first time in years, Billy felt part of something larger than himself, something pure, unhurried, and full of joy. Those words touched something deep inside him. He thought of his years in Tokyo, how often he'd traded sleep, peace, and time for goals that never seemed to end. Sitting there in the soft summer morning light, he wondered if all this time he had been running in circles instead of moving forward. The days that followed seemed easier. Billy began to wake later, just to rest after the long workdays. He began helping Marina with chores, fixing the garden fence, carrying baskets of vegetables from the fields. The work wasn't glamorous, but it brought him a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. The countryside began to reveal its rhythm to him. The sound of rain tapping on the rooftop, the distant call of a train, the gentle hum of cicadas at dusk, they became a kind of music, a slower, more meaningful melody that reminded him life didn't need to be loud to be full.
北山くん、ご飯できたよ。
ありがとう。
はい。
うわ、すごいご飯だね。
疲れてるでしょ？
One evening, while helping Kenji's wife prepare dinner, she whispered, "You know, Billy, sometimes it takes losing the noise to hear our own hearts again." He smiled, stirring the pot of miso soup, realizing how true that was. The more he embraced this slower life, the clearer his mind became. The anxiety that once clouded his thoughts began to fade. He felt grounded, calm, even inspired. Billy started sketching again, something he'd loved as a child but had abandoned in the city. He drew the sunsets, the lanterns, the people he met. Each drawing felt like a quiet promise to himself that he wouldn't forget what truly mattered. And just when everything seemed peaceful, life was preparing another test, one that would push Billy to look even deeper into what he believed about success, gratitude, and belonging. But for now, under that vast countryside sky, Billy wasn't worried. He simply braved in the cool night air and felt, for the first time in a long while, that he was exactly where he needed to be. Billy had grown comfortable with this rhythm, morning work, simple meals, quiet evenings. Yet deep inside, a familiar restlessness began to stir. He received a call from Tokyo. The company is stabilizing. He will return to the Tokyo branch soon. For a moment, his heart leaped. Could this be his chance to return? He felt a wave of uncertainty. All of it suddenly seemed fragile, like something he didn't want to lose. He thought of Kenji's family, how they'd welcomed him like a son, expecting nothing in return. He thought of the laughter at dinner, the advice, the shared silences. They'd given him something Tokyo never could, a sense of belonging. In that moment, he realized the truth. Real strength isn't about control or competition. It's about care, responsibility, and courage. For the first time, his decision felt peaceful. It wasn't about running away or running toward. It was simply about staying still and choosing what mattered most. That summer changed Billy forever. He learned that success isn't measured by speed, but by peace. The quiet kindness of a small town reminded him that gratitude and connection are the roots of true happiness. Sometimes, life brings us back to where we started, not to repeat the past, but to remember who we are and begin again, stronger and more grateful than before.
それじゃあ
世話になりました。
うん、またいつでも来いよ。今度うちの会社にさ、口聞いてるから。
いいよ。せっかく東京戻れるんだし、もう下手打ちはしないって。
だといいけどな。体に気をつけてな。
うん。じゃあ、マリナさんもバイバイ。
じゃあ、元気だな。
バイバイ。
This inspiring short film reminds us that success isn't just about chasing goals. It's about slowing down, appreciating life, and finding balance within ourselves. If you love inspirational stories and life-changing lessons, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming content.